Hi, I'm Nancy Shanto, and I'm here to read from Access to Power, a radical approach for changing your life. Today I'm going to read a sidebar called Dropping Out of Change, and it's from the Theory of Change chapter. And I wrote this sidebar to help people understand what happens when we try and make a change and get frustrated, stuck, and stop, and what we can do to make that shift to push through and make the change that we're seeking. And just to remind us about how much change is something that happens and is located in the body, and that if we orient that way, we're much more likely to be successful. So this is a long piece. Bear with me, and then I'll talk a little bit more about it. I've witnessed many smart, capable people who seem heartbroken around the change process. What I've learned is that we tend to be enthusiastic when we begin a new practice or try to change something. Our enthusiasm grows when we have an epiphany about why we did what we did, or discover a new way of doing something, and we get excited about making a change in our lives. However, at some point in the process, our enthusiasm dims or even disappears entirely. It seems like we'll never succeed, that change is out of reach, and there is some sort of personal failure that keeps us from changing. This type of resignation around the change process is normal. Fortunately, there's a good reason we lose heart and a way to make it through the process and complete the change we seek to make. Think of change as a range between 0% and 100%. When we're at 0%, we can only do the old behavior and are unable to do the new behavior at all. At 100%, we can do the new behavior 100% of the time, and we rarely or never do the old behavior anymore. When we begin a new practice or learn a new skill, we start doing the change a greater percentage of the time, from 0% to 10%, from 10% to 25%, and so forth, gaining in frequency of success as we continue to practice the new skill. Up until we reach about 35% success at the new practice, we're usually pretty enthusiastic. After all, previously we couldn't do the new skill at all. But here's what happens. Suddenly, as we near the 50% mark, our satisfaction often actually goes down. Why can't I get this? Perhaps we assume we should have been able to accomplish our goal by this point. Not too long ago, we were totally thrilled to do our new practice a third of the time. But somehow, a 50-50 success rate seems disappointing. I shouldn't still be doing that old practice anymore. There must be something wrong. We rejigger our design, recommit to our practice, but our heart isn't in it. Soon we find we aren't practicing at all, and we've lost ground, perhaps altogether. We look for a reason we failed and either pig ourselves for being too stupid to figure out a good plan, not good enough to make it happen, or too lazy to implement it, or we blame the practice we chose. Maybe that gym class just isn't right for me. Different people have different responses to this stage of the change process, and their reasons for giving up on change can be very personal. Perhaps we are the type of people who get so enthusiastic that we get overstimulated, anxious, and hyper-engaged. Giving up on a change might almost be a relief because we can settle down, recover our strength, and return to a more normal pattern of energy. Or we might tend to forget we are in the middle of a change and find ourselves numb, distracted, or dissociated, and then hard on ourselves for not keeping track of our new practice. I must not really want this, we might say to ourselves. I'm in the group that tends to feel disappointed and gives up on change because it doesn't seem to be working. If we experience this type of hopelessness and collapse around the uselessness of our efforts and the resigned feeling that change will never take hold, we might feel relief at not having to face the possibility of failure and the emotions that come with such a prospect. These types of emotional experiences might look a lot like our conditioned response to stress. We might fight, freeze, flee, move toward, or dissociate. Remember, change is a major stimulus, involves an increase in our respective power, and may trigger all kinds of responses in our nervous system, from fear to excitement, terror to numbness. Whatever our reasons, we go on this way, picking up a new practice and then dropping out when we don't learn it fast enough, over and over again. Richard Strozzi Heckler says of this starting over process, it's like putting a well on your property and you dig a bunch of 3-foot holes when you only need one 5-foot hole. Just think, by the time we finish digging the second 3-foot hole, we've put in more effort than if we had just dug one hole to 5 feet. It's exhausting and disheartening when our practices don't give us what we want. It's important at this stage to figure out what helps us stay committed. Sometimes we fall so in love with a practice that we make it through the difficult 50-50 stage. Sometimes we find a great teacher or a fantastic helper who knows that we need lots of extra support and encouragement around the 50% mark, and they help us re-engage until we get to 65% success or more. Perhaps we can do an analysis to see what little changes we can make to increase our success rate. Once we arrive at 65% rate of success, it's much easier to stay on track. We're only doing that old practice a third of the time, and 65% is pretty satisfying. Before long, we embody the skill and can do it most of the time. When we're making a change, it's extremely important to stay the course, keep doing the practice, and gain confidence in our ability to change. We are much more likely to succeed if we are kind to ourselves, surround ourselves with helpful community, and give ourselves the time we need to achieve the change we seek. So I wrote this because I see a lot of people struggle with changing and make it something wrong with them. Make it about themselves, make it about something, some failure, some incompetence, some inability. When often what I'm seeing is that people give up at a midpoint. And if they just persisted, they would pretty quickly be done. If you think about it, if we're giving up at 50%, we only have another 5 or 10 or 15% to go before we really are seeing the change is vastly the majority of what we do. And yet that 50% mark is such a disheartening place. And it really speaks to our desire in this culture to have fast fixes, to get things really quickly. If we're not an early developer of a skill, oftentimes we will dismiss it as if something we can't get. When in fact persistence is the most important thing when we're developing skill. The longer you practice something, the more likely you are to achieve that result. Malcolm Gladwell spent an entire book talking about this in his book Outliers, which I really enjoyed and highly recommend. So I really just want to encourage you, as you're taking on a practice or even an old practice that you might have given up on, you can pick that practice up again. You won't be starting at zero. And you might be able to get it really quickly to 65% just by staying with it. Oftentimes you don't need to do a redesign. You don't need to re-engage for the sake of what practice, checking your vision. None of that is necessary. What's necessary is getting up and doing it again. So I hope that helps, and have a wonderful holiday season. Thanks.